Well, good afternoon. So if you would rather do this the old-fashioned, old-school way, you can turn in your hymnal to page 82. I think this is probably one of the first songs we've done that is actually in this hymnal. If you like the screen, then it'll be up here. Would you stand with us, please? You may be seated. The oceans give up all, the dead that are in them, the graves open wide to set captives free, and those who are roaming the earth rise to meet Abraham's seed as the sands of the sea. These are they who have come out of great tribulation. They have washed their robes in the blood of the Lamb. They have come through much sorrow into great jubilation. They're redeemed by the blood of the Lamb. like a strong, mighty army. Their voices all ringing, the great cloud of witnesses sing freedom song as they enter the country built by their own father. It's the promised homeland that they've looked for so long. And all the strangers and pilgrims are no longer strangers, and all the tired and weary wanderers, they wander no more. The table is spread for the great celebration, and the welcome home banner flies over the door. These are they who have come out of great tribulation. They have washed their robes in the blood of the Lamb. They have come through much sorrow into great jubilation. They're redeemed by the blood of the Lamb. They're redeemed by the blood of the Lamb. The
Thank you, Vance and Jeannie. That was powerful. I don't think I could say it any better than the song says it. Just said it. And our theme of camp says it. We have hope. We have hope in Jesus, hope for this life, and hope for the next. That we understand that one day we will be reunited with Him, whether that be through death or through rapture. And we as Christians can always know that no matter what circumstances we are enduring, that our best days are always ahead, no matter what. And so we take this time each year to remember those from within our camp family that have completed their earthly journey and now are with the Lord, and one day will come back with Him to receive all of His children. And so those that we'll be remembering today, I just want to go through all the names in case there might be someone that we don't have on our list. You can let us know. And then we will take some time to remember each person individually, and we will give you an opportunity to share. And we would ask that when you share, Sean will have a mic available, and please use the mic because it'll make it easier for the rest of us to hear, but also those that are those that are listening on live stream or maybe watching this service afterwards will be able to hear your word of testimony about our loved ones. So the first person, and we take them in the order in which they passed since our last encampment. So our first camper will be Celia Murray, who passed away on December 8th, 2022. Burl McClay, who passed on January 6th, 2023. Dorothy Johnson, who passed on January 21st, 2023. And Eugene Park, who passed on April 12th, 2023. Is there anyone that perhaps we missed or were not aware of? Okay, what I will do, and again, this is something that I appreciate so much that Carol does, is she does keep track throughout the course of the year, and then usually provides me with with an obituary. And so I'll share the obituary, and then we'll take some time to remember. So the first is Celia A. Murray. Celia A. Murray was born in Uniontown, Pennsylvania, and passed away on December 8th, 2022, at the age of 74. She was predeceased by her parents, James Regis and Frances Cook Yager, and her husband, Paul Darwin Murray. She is survived by her children, Sean and Shelley Murray of Canfield, Heather Schulman and her husband, Micah of Cortland, her brothers, David Yager and Judy of Salem, and Brian Yager of Naples, Florida, her stepsister, Harriet Walsh, and her grandchildren, Aurora Thornton, Jocelyn Kerr, Sean Paul Murray, Gregory Murray, Kate Ann Murray, Aidan and Morgan Schulman, and her great-grandchild, Jamie Darwin Kerr. And visitation was held on December 15th, and the funeral on December 16th at the Highway Tabernacle Church in Austintown, Ohio. We have put on the screen here a picture of Celia and Nancy Overman. I think I saw Nancy walk in. Yeah, Nancy's in the back there. I'm sure Nancy will have some things to share with us. But this is a picture of the two of them from several years ago when they were planning for the talent show. And as I recall, it was Celia and Nancy who got the talent show started here at camp years ago. So when I think of Celia, I just think of a fun person. Really was a fun person who loved the Lord and who served here at the camp. So who would have a word of testimony to share about the life and times of Celia Murray?
Celia is forever linked with camp in my heart. And we came across that picture months after she had passed, and Heather gave it to me. She said, "Do you know what this is?" And I said, "I know exactly what it is. I had to talk her into helping me do the talent show. Look at all that hair I had. And look at how she always was a very striking woman." We had a lot of good times here, and I shared my life in a close way with her for 50-some years. But the reason I'm here today is because she testified about Jesus to me in a bowling alley. And I didn't believe a word she said, and I argued with her right down the line until I asked Jesus into my heart. So Celia earned her crown, her jewel and crown with me, and I have nothing but precious memories with her, especially the laughter. She could tell a story like nobody else. And even right to the end, a couple days before she passed, we laughed so hard over what we were going to say at each other's funeral. When she told me what she was going to say at mine, I said, "You got to go first." And we just laughed so hard just a couple of days before she died that almost one of 100 times in my life I almost peed because I was laughing so hard from what Celia said. Celia was a funny, funny lady, and I miss her greatly. She loved the Lord, and on her headstone, that's what she really wanted, was that she was blessed to be able to behold the beauty of the Lord.
Amen.
So we'll never forget that she led me to the way to eternal life.
Some of you may not know, but Nancy is to be commended for how she took care of her friend on the home stretch, because Nancy came up north and took care of Celia and watched over her for months. So God saw that. He honors that. Yes?
Well, I had the pleasure, and it's so hard for me to talk, and I'm sorry, I hope I can say this. I had the pleasure to work and be with Celia at the United Methodist Church in Berlin Center, Ohio. We sat on the board together. She got me in trouble on more than one occasion with talking, but she made me laugh. That's the thing. If I think about Celia Murray, there wasn't a time, I cannot remember a time that she grumbled to me about anything. There was always, she always had her love in her heart about something and had a story to tell about it. And so I feel blessed that I knew her, and I know she's having a good time up there in heaven, and there's a lot of people having a good time with her, so.
Thank you.
Well, I knew Celia. She was my cousin's wife. And I'll tell you a funny story. One time, she had the cottage going down the hill, and the one end was really high off the ground. And we had, she was always afraid someone coming in because it might collapse. So this one year we had this evangelist, and he was a little on the large side. And when he come in, and I'll never forget, she said, here, sit right here, sit right here. She didn't want him going over to the other side because she was afraid that it might collapse. And we just laughed and laughed about that. She was a wonderful person, always pleasant, always had a smile. She was just well loved by everybody.
Celia and Darwin both owned businesses and were successful in their businesses. I think I saw Carol has her hand up back there.
I can share something a little funny about Celia. When we first came to the camp, and that was years ago, she sort of took me under her wing. And this one day she said to me, Diney, we called her Diney, Diane Libb, and we'd like to fix your hair. And I said, oh, really? And she said, yeah, come down to my cottage. We're going to wash it and fix it. So I said, okay. So I went down to her cottage, and of course, she didn't have any hot water or anything. She just had cold water. And I said, well, how are you going to wash my hair in here? She said, just let me do it. She said, I can do it. And boy, was that water cold. She took and she put it in a pitcher, and she poured it over my head, and then they soaked it up and they rinsed it off, and I was shivering. I was so cold. I'll never forget. And they were laughing in there, and they curled it all up and everything. It looked really nice, but I mean, it was fun. She was just so much fun to be around. She always had a positive attitude and a smile on her face. I never heard anything negative from Celia. She was just a wonderful person, and when for a while there they didn't come, I really missed her, because she, when very first time I came here at camp, she was just right there with me, and I always loved Celia.
Any other memories of Celia? Well, our camp family was blessed by her life, and of course, can't remember Celia without also remembering Darwin. and they were both wonderful people and wonderful to our camp family. And so we thank God for their memories and look forward to seeing them once again. Next is Burl Ann McClay. Burl McClay, age 82, of Ephrata, Pennsylvania, passed away on January 6, 2023, at Fairmont Nursing Home in Ephrata, PA. Born June 23, 1940, in Homestead, PA, she was the daughter of Harris and Marianne Mackenzie Smith. On July 19, 1969, she married her beloved husband of 41 years, Frank McClay, who preceded her in death on December 5, 2010. Burl was a graduate of Laurel High School. She was employed by Union School District as a secretary for 21 years. She was member of the former First Church of the Nazarene and later attended First Baptist Church. She was a Sunday school teacher and a Girl Scout leader. What gave Burl the most joy in life was spending time with her family and talking with friends on the phone. She is survived by her daughter, Barb and Rob Smith of Ephrata, PA, a niece, Charlene Richard Cohn of Liberty Hills, Texas, whom Burl served as her legal guardian, a sister, Grace Ford of Leander, Texas, 2 grandchildren, Emily and Caleb Smith of Ephrata, and several nieces, nephews, and cousins. And we're happy to have the Smith family here with us today. She is preceded in death by her parents, husband, in-laws, and siblings-in-law. Visitation was held on January 13th, 2023 at the R. Cunningham Funeral Home in Newcastle, with Pastor Nathan Doyle officiating. And Burl was interred at the Oak Park Cemetery. Anyone like to share a memory of our longtime friend, Burl McClay?
She scared me. When I first started coming to camp, my kids and I stayed up in Dan's cottage, and she just scared me for the first year. And then the next year I fell in love with her. And she still yelled at me though, but she was always sitting on that porch rocking, always sitting on that porch. And so I'm glad I got to meet her and get yelled at by her.
We always called her Aunt Burl. We would come down and she'd be on her porch, and it was always cool because she would always want to know how your year went. She'd want to know all about the family and everything. It was always cool to talk to her, and I always loved her laugh. She had a really unique laugh, and it was always fun to hear Burl laughing. So.
It's hard for me to talk about Burl, because Burl and I were very close. When we first came up here to camp, we were looking at the cottage up on the hill, and it was right next door to hers. And so we got to be really close friends. I didn't know Burl, but I knew her husband when we were teenagers, because he stayed at his aunt's over by where we lived. And so we used to all get together, the teenagers in the neighborhood, and he'd come along with us. So she was really surprised to know that I knew Frankie before her. But anyway, I can remember one day she comes screaming out of the cottage. We were right next door, and she said, "Barbie spilled the liquid in our porta potty, and it's all over my rug." She said, "I don't know what to do." I'm telling you, it was so funny. And so I said, "Well, Burl, I'll help you clean it up. We'll get it cleaned up and everything." And she said, "Well, I hope so." But anyway, she moved, when her parents died, she moved down into their cottage, and we bought the one on the end. We moved too. So we were just a couple cottages apart. And this one night, it was after we were all in bed, she come running down the porch screaming. She said, Tom, I need help." She said, "There's a cricket in my cottage and it's singing." She said, "I can't sleep with that." So he said, "Okay, I'll come down." So he went down and had to find the cricket, first of all, and then he got it out of the cottage. But I mean, those are just a couple of the things that were fun that we had with them. And they used to sit on our porch all the time, and we would share together. But Burl and I spent many years together in the office. She was a treasurer, and I was a financial secretary, and we worked together. And so during the year, we were in contact all the time about the camp. And so I really missed that when she resigned as treasurer, and of course I resigned as financial secretary. And so I didn't get the emails like I used to, and I really missed it. But every once in a while, she'd call me or I'd call her, and we'd share together. So Burl really meant a lot to me, and I really loved her. And she loved our family, and we loved her family, Barbie and the family. And so I really miss Burl. I really do.
I better talk now before I get crying too much. So my mom loved this camp. She was here 78 years altogether. Her parents had met here, and she came since she was 5 weeks old until she was 78 years old. And after camp, she had a stroke. And then one thing after the other, her health declined. But she loved camp. She served as a cook, she served as the treasurer, and so many times she was worried about the finances, but God always provided. God always takes care of camp, and we miss her. It's been good to be here, but it's been a little bittersweet not seeing her up over the hill, walking down towards the bathroom or just whatnot. And she had a little stern personality, so I appreciate what you said, Johnny. She was feisty, and as an old person, she got feistier at times, so at times... but she really had a heart. She loved Jesus. She loved people. And she really loved interacting with the church family every year. And we were all blessed to have her in our lives. So we miss her. But we know she's in heaven, and she's free from pain. She really suffered at the end. So we were grateful. She was in a great nursing home when she left this earthly place. And we played hymns in her final moments, and I know I had a moment Sunday morning when we had such beautiful worship, and I felt like we were touching the throne of heaven as we were worshiping, and I just could picture her and Jesus and all my relatives. So many of my relatives have come to these campgrounds and sat in these pews, and I just could picture them all in heaven worshiping and praising Jesus, and I felt like camp touched heaven a bit, and we're worshiping together even though we're separated.
Amen.
Try this again. I didn't get to see the mean or the feisty part of Burl. She was always so sweet to me. When it came time for her to pass the baton, I said that I would do it, not knowing really what the job involved. But she was very gracious with me and was very kind throughout the whole process. And, any questions, nothing was stupid, she just really was a kind spirit with me through that whole transition. And we got to know each other very well. And that laugh, yes, it was very distinct, and I loved it, and I miss her too here. And but again, we know, and our hopes in knowing that she's in a good place, and she's being very well taken care of. So, but I'm glad that I got to meet your mom, and I'm glad I got to spend the time that I did with her.
Got a hand up in the back there.
Well, Burla was always just a part of camp for me. She was always on her porch close by to Grandma, and so I spent a lot of time with her, and we had a lot of chats. And when I became the baker, she would chat with me about that because she did it one year, and she said that's all she could handle. And she would see me get up super early because it was very hard to bake my first year. The ovens were well used, and I would get up at like 5 or something, I don't even know. But anyway, she watched me go through that and was very supportive, and she made sure that the next year there was enough money for us to get the conviction oven for me so that I wouldn't have to wake up at 5 a.m. anymore. And, you know, because of her, I get to really enjoy my time at camp because I don't have to share the oven with anyone. And I can bake, you know, at my leisure, and I really appreciate that because, you know, I'm here because I want to learn about Jesus, but I also want to bake good stuff for you, and she helped make that happen, so I really appreciate that. And I was really thinking about her today when I was making the Reese bars, so that was one of her favorites.
Burl was one of the first people that I remember here at camp when I was a kid, and she was always just felt like part of the family. Like, you know, my dad said, she was Aunt Burl, so, you know, I just saw her every July when I came to camp. But I believe her, in conjunction with my grandmother, were actually my first employers, and that was with the Durfee Trash Service on my bicycle. So every morning I'd go by their cottages and I'd pick up Aunt Burl's trash, and I'd pick up Grandma's trash, and they'd each give me a quarter. So I made 50 cents a day picking up trash, and then I could go spend that at the snack bar or the book room. And so that was just a fun memory I had when I was a kid here.
Yeah, what I remember about Burl is I like history of things, and she was able to tell me a lot of things that happened at camp, like when she was a kid and stuff, and to me that was very interesting. I mean, she talked about how she slept on the floor in her grandparents' cottage, which is the one right next to me, and that was interesting because she was saying we just slept on the floor, not a big deal. We didn't have to have beds, you know, kids these days, they have to have a bed to sleep in. They're not going to sleep on the floor. But anyway, it was just interesting, the history that she had about this place, and I'm going to miss her because if I want to know something, I don't have anyone to ask because my dad's gone, and she knew the stuff that I needed to know, so.
When I first started coming here, it was 26 years ago, and I just rode up with friends from Streetsboro, and I think the first 3 years I just came for a day, and that was it. We'd come early and go home at supper, after supper or something. But Burl was one of the seasoned people who made sure she spoke to me and talked to me and spent time with me. And it took a lot of years, and after that we started coming more. I started 3 days at a time, and then it increased after a while. But I would say, you know, I just couldn't afford it. And she says, you know, and she would tell me the job that she had. She says, sometimes we look at these bills and I don't know how I'm going to take care of these bills. She said, but God always, always supplies. So if you want to come here, he's going to supply and make it possible. And he did. And she was just such a sweet person, just so much fun. And she always knew my name. Like in the beginning when I came one day out of the year, she remembered me that next year and called me by name. And we just had a lot of good times. A lot of, you know, we got to visit her in the last few years twice, and phone calls, and she is just one of the reasons that camp was important to me. And it also, excuse me, I think she made me understand the importance of reaching out to other people coming in and making them feel welcome like she did to me. I want to help other people feel welcome because that's what the Lord would want. And so I miss her terribly also.
When I first started coming to camp, I mean, I was a camper, and then we didn't come for a while, and then we started coming when our kids were getting older, and we wanted to get them experience at the camp plan. And I remember, I could vaguely remember her when I was a teen, because we were all caught up with teen stuff. But the first time when I saw her, we had to pay for where we were staying, and I saw Carol and Burl walking together like everywhere I saw them, and I asked him, I'm like, are those two sisters? Because they were like everywhere together, just, you know. And but yeah, she always had a lot of humor too, and I've always enjoyed visiting with her. She always lifted up the Lord,
and always said she wanted to, if we had any concerns or prayer requests. And I had some opportunities just to talk with her. Not too many, but when I did, it was very memorable to me. And then she has a Facebook page. And so a couple times we would chat through the Facebook page. And, it was more like a personal one-on-one. So I've really missed her, and it was so good to see her 2 years ago, because we didn't come last year, but 2 years ago, with her being there, it just really did something with the camp for everybody, just to see her. She made herself come and see everybody, and it was such a blessing to see her.
It's hard for me to crystallize into a few things, all the memories that I have of Burl. Susan, you touched on the history, and I have a little bit of a reputation for tearing things down here at camp, so if we have an old building, I eventually tear it down. And whenever I would tear something down, she would give me the history of that building. So some of you might remember there was a shed that was just the other side of the dining hall, and was it her grandfather? Yeah, was a caretaker of the camp, and that's where he stayed. That was his cottage, and then eventually it became a shed, and then eventually it became, just in disrepair, and eventually Dan tore it down. But she would always know the history of everything at camp. She was the treasurer when I became the president, and what a wonderful person to help me being new in that role. And it was kind of a tumultuous time at the camp too, and she was just always that steady person. The word that always comes to mind with me, with Burl, because she dealt with the business of the camp, is diligent. She was always diligent. Things were always done properly in the right way, and she always would update me and help me. And so many times she would say what you shared, Beth, that I don't know how this is going to happen, but I know God is going to provide. And she always would say that many times. And I can remember some pretty miraculous ways that God provided. Some of you will remember the time that the county decided to assess taxes on the whole camp except for this building. They basically said, hey, we exempt your house of worship, but the rest of it's all taxable. And it was going to be just like $15,000 a year. We just wouldn't have been able to do it. And we began to work with an attorney, and we needed to provide a lot of financial records and things, and Burl, of course, had that all together. And then I remember shortly before we were going to have a hearing with the assessment board, I lost my job, and I thought, I'm not going to tell Burl. I don't want to make her nervous about that when we have to deal with this. So I didn't say anything to her. And we both showed up there at the courthouse in Meadville. And she said to me, boy, it's so wonderful that the bank gives you the time to deal with stuff like that. And I said, yeah, it really is. They've given me all the time I need to deal with this. And so after the meeting, then I told her about it, and the Lord just really moved in that situation, and I won't get into it because it would be too long, but God really provided and did something miraculous in that situation and in many others. And then I also appreciated her diligence in getting, when we got to a point that we were ready to make a transition, and she just brought Lisa on board, and the two of them just worked seamlessly, and it went so smooth, and my relationship with Lisa is almost exactly the same as it was with Burl. Everything has worked so well. And, I give Burl credit for that. At her funeral, I found out, a few things about Burl that I didn't know. I didn't know that her nickname was Burl the Squirrel. And this is what Frank called her, because she was always busy doing this and doing that, and doing this and that. I know a few people like that. But and that's the way Burl was. And I can remember so many times in the last few years, she would apologize to me and say, Dan, I really want to come to work day, but I can't walk around anymore. I can't do this or that. And I would just be like, but she said, I'll be praying for you. And I said, Burl, I know you will be praying, and I know you'd be here if you could, and it's all okay. And we would enjoy having times to talk together. It also, I remember that when you know so many people within the camp, when you're in the position I'm in, I mean, you know a lot of people, and come Christmas time, it's like, okay, well, you can't send a Christmas card to everybody in the church and everybody in the camp and other friends that you have. But Burl was always on the Christmas card list. I never took her off, and right until the end, she always got a Christmas card. And whenever she would see me, she would say, how's DJ, how's Courtney? She knew everybody's name and would always ask about everybody. And the last memory of Burl is the last time she was here at camp. And that was for our 125th encampment. And she came and was honored with a Lifetime Achievement Award that really, I think, totally caught her off guard. She didn't expect something like that to happen. And she was getting around in a wheelchair by that time, and Barbie brought her up here on stage, and she looked over at me and she said, "You stinker." But I'm so glad that we did that, and I'm so glad that Burl was able to come here to camp and to see all of you one last time, and to be thanked by the whole camp for everything that she did while she was still here with us. So, Sean, I think you had someone else that wanted to share.
Yeah, I knew Burl for years. She was on the camp plan with my sister. And but recently, Jody and Ward took us to see her last fall. And I'm telling you, that mind was so sharp. I wish I had a mind like that now. I mean, she remembered everything, and she joked with Ward. I mean, those two went back and forth, joking and laughing, and I just couldn't get over her mind, how sharp it was, just till the very end. She had a sharp mind. She was really blessed, and I'm going to miss her, because when you come to camp, you look at certain places, and you look for that person, and they're not there anymore. So I've been blessed to know her.
Okay, we've got in the back there, Sean.
I don't have any deep stories about Burl. My memory of Burl is Carol. Every time I even think of her, you were always there. The two of you were the deadly duo. You kept us all in line. And I appreciate both of you. But when you say you look for somebody and they're not there, he's not on the list, but I didn't get an opportunity. One of the people for me was Tom. He was always kind to us. We were up here a lot before camp ever started when I lived here. Very kind to my son and daughter and me. And I miss him terribly. And I know, Diane, when you look for that person and they're not there, I'm glad that we got to know them when they were, especially Tom.
Would anyone else like to share? Okay. Well, we thank the Lord. Obviously, what you've heard shared, we're all very thankful that we had Burl McClay in our lives, and our lives are better because of it. And so we look forward to seeing her once again. Our next camper is Dorothy Ellen Johnson, 54, of Clearfield, passed away into the presence of her Lord and Savior Jesus Christ on Saturday, January 21st, 2023, at the age of 94. Dorothy was born on June 10th, 1928 in Clearfield, and was the daughter of Helmer and Olga Ogren Johnson. She is fondly remembered as saying, "I'm not looking for the undertaker, I'm looking for the upper taker. And my heavenly Father watches over me." She spent her life sharing the good news of Jesus Christ. She traveled full-time with her sisters as the Johnson Sister Trio, singing gospel music, leading congregational singing, and playing various kinds of bells, choral concert glasses, shaker organ chimes, and the mandolin. She spent many years in evangelistic work, Bible conferences, and vacation Bible schools, as well as providing children's ministry for various church camps, Peniel being one of them. Although Dorothy traveled all around the United States and Canada, she faithfully shared the love of Jesus with everyone she came in contact with in her hometown. She attended the Christian and Missionary Alliance Church of Clearfield and was a faithful prayer warrior for her loved ones and church family. Dorothy is survived by her sister, Emma Claude Hunsberger, and many nieces, nephews, and cousins. She was preceded in death by her parents, 3 sisters, Elsie Johnson, Mildred Eckley, and Ruth Miller, and 4 brothers, Harold, Victor, Raymond, and Gilbert Johnson. There was calling hours on Thursday, January 26th at the CMA Church there in Clearfield, and a celebration of life service was held with the Reverend Dwayne White officiating. Any memories of Dorothy Ellen Johnson?
I have a lot of memories with the Johnson sisters. I traveled with them for 5 to 6 years. A lot of you knew Dorothy. She was a very active, very great person to work with kids because she had tons of energy. And even into her later years, she still had lots of energy. And the way she would drive, we had this big bread van. She wasn't afraid to drive that thing anywhere, and we would take that into town, like we'd be at a church and staying there, and we'd have to go get some. We just jump in the van, and she would just whip that van right down into town, and we would go pick up whatever we needed to pick up and right back to where we were going. But one of the funny memories, we were going to, in between Bible schools, we were heading to another church, and we're driving down the road, and all of a sudden we heard this loud bang. And Ruth was a real nervous Nellie. She would always be sitting on the bench, and Dorothy would always have to calm her down, but Ruth thought we were being shot at. And then Dorothy's like, "Ruth, just calm down." And she just kept on running that van, like, kept it rolling. And then Ruth's like, "Well, maybe we blew a tire. You better pull over." So Dorothy's like, "We'll be fine." So she pulled over, and I got out and looked, and everything was fine. And I get back in the van, and I said, "I think we just backfired. I think that's all that happened." But, it didn't faze Dorothy at all. She's like, "We'll just get back on the road and keep on rolling." And she has kept that van heading down the road. But there was a lot of experiences we had. But like I said, she was always witnessing, too. Like when I stayed with them in Clearfield, she was like the local celebrity. We'd be going into the truck stop, and there'd be truckers in there, and everybody knew Dorothy, Aunt Dot. They all knew her. In fact, Alec and I were going over to, where did we go? Reading, PA. So we went through Clearfield, and I said, hey, this stop, the truck stop, I want to go up there, and maybe we'll run into her. Maybe she's up there or whatever. And I went in, and asked the lady that was at the counter, I said, do you know Dorothy Johnson? And she said, yeah, I know Aunt Dot. I said, well, has she been in here lately? And she's like, no, she hasn't been, but they actually knew her, still remembered her in there at the truck stop, because that's where they would go get something to eat sometimes. But it was just, she was an amazing lady.
Lori, could you grab me a bottle of water out of the supply room?
Well, to me, children's meeting was the Johnson sisters. They did it the whole time I was there. And they planted a lot of seeds in me the whole time until I was 12 years old. And they used to always give us special gifts because my sister's birthday was during camp. And so we used to have a special birthday party with them every year. And you know, they were just wonderful ladies and really loved the Lord and just did everything they could to make sure that we learned about God. And she used to do object lessons, and I thought that that's all magic was for, was object lessons, because she always did them every year, and that's when I would see magic, and she always had a lesson to teach us with her object lessons about Jesus.
Well, Dorothy and Ruth led our children's ministry when I first began coming to the camp. And I remember all the puppets. And they would always give Sean a puppet. He would do the laughing song with the puppet. Honestly, if they were still around, they would come and they'd make Sean come up front as a fully grown man and dad, and he'd do it. If they told him to do it, he'd still do it, right? But, you know, I had a memory of Dorothy the other night because we sang What a Mighty God We Serve. And every time I hear that song, I think about her and the way she would lead music. She'd just be up there, and her face would turn beet red because she would just sing out as loud as she could and be waving her arms and stomping her feet and getting those kids all excited. And, you know, you'd think, boy, I hope she doesn't fall over. I mean, but she, like Sean was saying, she just had energy, and she put everything into it. And for the rest of my life, every time I sing that song or hear that song, I'm in my mind's eye, I'm going to see Dorothy leading it. And I think someday when I get to heaven, we'll sit down, and we won't sit, but we'll stand up and jump around and we'll sing that song again in the heavens. But they did a wonderful job with our children's ministry. They did VBS at our church for many years, and they were just they were wonderful ladies. And I'm not surprised that she was basically a rock star in her hometown, because Dorothy is one of those persons that, you know, you could say you wouldn't meet anybody that didn't like her. You know, we're not all that way, but she was. Was there someone else? Yes.
Yeah. When Karen was talking about how she helped her plant seeds as growing up on the campground, my sons, both TJ and Danny, and of course Scott, and who else? Justin Trimble, and there was who else? Yeah. And Sarah Piper. There was a bunch of little kids. They all grew up with them, and the puppets. I remember that so much because she tried to get the kids to do puppeting. And when they got to a certain age, they're kind of, there's the little 5 and 6-year-olds, and these guys, you guys were like 9, 10, 11. You're like, you didn't really want to participate. But she really put like you said, she put an imph to the kids, like, come on, you can do it. And she'd play the music, and they had that piano, and they looked like they weren't having fun. But when I looked in the window after I left, and they were having a good time, but they make everybody think, because we're older kids and stuff. But she really did put a lot of fun in the classroom there in the children's tab. And I know if Danny was here, he would probably say how much he really enjoyed those ladies, Dorothy and Ruth. Yes, thank you.
Of course, I got to know Dorothy because we would take Sean over there when he was going to go with him and travel all summer with him. But one of the things I remember about them were their crafts that they had. They weren't anything made out of paper or anything like that. They would go all out, and I guess Ruth's husband would cut out things for them to paint and do different things. And I remember they made these vases, and they glued macaroni on them and then painted them white. I have one in my cottage, and one time they made some kind of a hat. It was a straw hat, and what was it? Do you remember what it was? I know it's down in my basement, but is it a cowboy or something? I don't know what it was. A cow, that's what it is. But anyway, I still have the crafts. In fact, on my door up on my cottage is one of the crafts that they made, because see, I had Sue's 2 girls in there, and then Karen was in there, and then Carissa was in there. So they would make, each one make one, so I always got one because they had an extra one, they gave them to her mother, but then I got one. So I've kept them, and I see them all the time in my cottage and downstairs in my house. And I just remember that they went all out for that. And when it was over with, they worked on it every day. It was a craft. They did something every day on it, all week. And then when it was over, they took them home. And so I know they put a lot of time and work into them, and I really appreciate it, and I prize them.
Any other memories of Dorothy Johnson? Well, Dorothy and Ruth and the Johnson sisters are going to meet a lot of people in heaven over the years that go by that were influenced by them for Jesus when they were boys and girls. And they'll have lots of friends up there with them. Our next camper is Eugene Edward Park. Gene was born January 3rd, 1931 to Grace and Ora Park, and he was the baby of his family with 4 children being raised on a small farm. Born in 1931, he passed on April 12th, 2023. In 1950, Gene was drafted into the Army to fight in the Korean War. This was a very difficult time, but one in which he learned to trust God with his future. He was an engineer and carried supplies and munitions to the battlefield in a coal-powered train. After the war, he returned home and began his studies at Eastern Nazarene College, where he received his bachelor's degree in science. He found himself in a pharmaceutical laboratory where he perfected different methods of sterile technique. In 1974, God led he and his family to Fort Worth to Alcon Laboratories. It was here that he used those skills to lead his team to numerous breakthrough sterile processing techniques that radically changed the pharmaceutical industry and are still in use today. With each breakthrough, he reminded his team and those in the industry that it was God's wisdom that had given them the ability to do the things they did. He never took credit or praise. These are things that most people do not know about Gene. I did not know any of those things about Gene. These are things most people do not know about Gene because the focus of his life was not his accomplishments, but rather his love for his Savior. He gave his life to Jesus as a young man and lived his life to serve him and tell others about this wondrous opportunity to have a personal relationship with God. You wouldn't have to be around him long before you heard his testimony of God's faithfulness throughout his life and the encouragement to trust in him. It was the truth he knew and would not miss the opportunity to share the thing that had changed his life so many years ago. He was married to the love of his life, Marilyn, for 36 years, and after retirement, they enjoyed fishing and traveling in their RV. Marilyn went to heaven in 2001, but his love never wavered. He spoke of her daily, keeping her memory alive throughout his time without her. Gene is survived by his 4 daughters, 17 grandchildren, and 26 great-grandchildren. Do we have any memories to share of Eugene Park?
About 6 years ago, I think it was, when Eugene came back to camp, he was here when he was a young boy, and he really loved Peniel. And his obituary, if you ever had time to talk to Eugene, you knew that he had a love for the Lord. I think of Stephen Manley whenever he's here, and he's saying how you have to be saturated. And I think of Eugene, and he was absolutely saturated. He couldn't speak to you without speaking or giving a testimony or a witness about how God did something in his life and how he can do that for you too. And I feel greatly honored that I had the opportunity to get to know him as well as I did, and we would talk to each other on the off seasons. And this past year when I was talking to him on the phone, and I'm so glad that I was able to, I told him, I said, you know what, Gene? I said, I love you. I said, you're just like a dad to me. And my dad was not too great of a guy. And it was a real blessing to me that I could have somebody that I could talk to, that you just really felt the love coming from him and how much he cared. And I feel blessed to have known him. I feel blessed to have been able to spend as much time as I was able to with him. We talked this spring prior to everything happening about getting a cottage for him. And he had the stroke, and then it got where we thought he was going to be okay. And then his daughter texted me and let me know that he had passed. And she said that he lived his whole life for this first day in heaven. And I thought that was quite, that summed it up. So I miss him here at camp, just like they've said, you know, Diane and them. I look over at the president's cottage and I don't see him sitting on the porch, and I miss that, but I know at the same time that he's smiling his biggest smile. So, and that gives you a lot of comfort, so.
I really enjoyed getting to know him at prayer meeting because he came every day and he was a great prayer warrior for our camp, and he loved to share about when he was a little boy at camp, and I really enjoyed having that time with him.
Tom and I were always greeters back here at the camp in the evening. We would greet people, and that's how we got to know a lot of people at camp. And Gene came, and after church that night, we had introduced ourselves to him, and he was talking to Tom and I, and he was saying that when he was a little boy, his family would come to camp, and this was in the 40s, and they would bring a blanket, and they would have a picnic right out here under the trees. And he said that his mother would pack their picnic lunch, and they'd sit on the blanket because they couldn't afford to eat in the dining hall. So they would just all come out here, and they'd have a picnic. And Tom said, you know what? He said, my family did that too. He said there was 6 children in Tom's family, and my mother brought a blanket. And he said, we sat out here too, and come to find out, they were right next to one another out here. And they had so much that they could share together because, you know, that was a time when they were out there. And Tom had shared how he was saved here at the altar, and Eugene told him how much the camp had meant to him as a little boy. And so that was a real blessing to our family.
Well, Gene was 92 years old when he passed, and so his last camp was last year, and he was 91, and he was in good health. He really was. I think he had stopped driving by that point in time, but he had family in was it Jefferson? I think he had a son that lived over that way, so he would spend the summers up this way. And then he spent the winters down in Texas. And then he also had family in Columbus as well, I think. Am I right, Lisa? Yeah, okay. Yeah. So he spent his summers up north and his winters down in Texas. And I really can't add anything but what's already been said. When you met Gene, he would give testimony for how the Lord's worked in his life. I never knew anything about what was there in his obituary and some of his accomplishments, which were considerable, because he never talked about things like that. He just talked about the Lord. Any other memories of Eugene Park? Well, let's just stand and we'll have a word of prayer. And then let's see if after we pray, if we can all manage to sing the chorus of Family of God together. Father, we just thank you so much for this time that we've had to remember your servants who have been called home. And Lord, we want to thank you. Thank you for allowing us to be a part of their lives, and for the love and knowledge and service that they poured out from themselves into us. We're a better people, and this is a better camp because of them. And we thank you for what you did through their lives. We look forward, Lord, that we have the hope of your scriptures, that we know we will see these loved ones again, because we will be reunited in Jesus Christ. We'll be a part of that family, the family of God. Amen. I'm so glad I'm a part of the family of God. I've been washed in the fountain, cleansed by his blood. Join heirs with Jesus as we travel this sod. For I'm part of the family of God. Well, have a good afternoon. We'll see you down here tonight at 7:30. Remember, it is Christmas in July, so try to wear some Christmas-themed clothes or colors tonight. We'll see you then.